Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching India's World with me, Rausan Pereira. President Ram Nath Kovind is on a 4-day visit to Myanmar from Monday. During his stay, the President will visit capital Naypyidaw and Yangon and interact with his counterpart in Myint and State Counsellor Aung Suu Kyi. A high-level delegation is also accompanying the President. In the past 3 years, India's political, economic and defence ties with Myanmar have grown rapidly. Through this visit, the President will reaffirm India's commitment to developing an important partnership with our neighbour. The visit is expected to maintain the momentum generated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Myanmar in September last year and the visit of Suu Kyi to New Delhi in January this year. Myanmar is a country where India's Act East and Neighbourhood First policies intersect. It is the only ASEAN member state that is both a land and maritime neighbour of India. It is strategically important for the development of India's northeast and also a link to Southeast Asia. A joint statement will be adopted during the visit along with the signing of several agreements. On this edition of India's World, we will analyse President Kovind's visit to Myanmar. Joining me on the programme today are Major General Dhruv C. Katoch, Director, India Foundation, Veena Sikri, former Ambassador, and Professor S.T. Muni, Foreign Affairs expert. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of India's World. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you. What can we expect from President Kovind's visit to Myanmar?
I think first you have to see that this is an important visit. I think it's the second visit by President Ram Nath Kovind ji to an ASEAN country. He was in Vietnam fairly recently. And for the President of Myanmar, it's his first foreign dignitary to come on a state visit. So I think that from both these points of view, it's of great significance because the President of Myanmar took office in March this year. And it's a continuation of the high-level visit exchanges with Myanmar that we have, which highlight the importance of Myanmar-India relations in many contexts. One, I would say, of course, is the defense and security context because we have a very long land border with Myanmar. And in the second is the whole context of Northeast India. And if you see, with accompanying President Kovind on this visit, we have two members of parliament, one from Manipur and one from Assam. We have the Minister of State for Railways. So the focus on Northeast is very important. And indeed, I think the border, a land border, is so significant that it highlights what Myanmar is also looking for in cooperation with India. Health sector, they need a lot of help in the health sector, education sector, and then investments from India, agriculture, information technology. We have a large number of students, Myanmar students coming, not only for undergraduate studies, but even I-Tech program, ICCR scholarships, over 1,000 every year. Trade is very good between India and Myanmar. We have built a number of key institutions for Myanmar in information technology sector, in agricultural research sector. And so I think that these visits are vital to strengthen the relationship, to create higher and higher level of understanding, and also by interacting with the people of Indian origin, by the NRI community, by young students, it also spreads the message about the importance Myanmar has for India at all levels, among students and other levels.
It's important to build on what we already have is what you're suggesting. All right, Professor Muni, what's likely to be on top of the agenda during this visit?
I think it is essentially a goodwill visit. And at the President's level, which is a very high level, you must also look at this visit in the two specific contexts. One is the neighbourhood first, which Ambassador Sikri has already underlined. The second is that, look, we are facing a huge competition with China in terms of its influence in India's neighbourhood. And in Myanmar, the Chinese have always been very strong. Recently, they have signed a very important port agreement with Chapchu. I can never pronounce it right, but whatever.
It starts with a Y.
You understand that. Where the scale of investment has been downgraded from almost 8 billion to 1.3 billion. But the Chinese are building a deep sea port, and it is quite possible that they would take a lot of supplies, including energy, from there to Yunnan, which is their peripheral region, very far off from their mainland. Therefore, I think we have to continue to cultivate the neighbors, and this is where various agreements of cooperation would be signed, as you underlined that. So the significance lies actually in keeping in close touch with the neighbors and reassuring them that if and when they need us, we are around.
Talking about Myanmar and China, General, Myanmar, unlike others in the neighborhood, has always pushed back China from time to time whenever they had the need to. That having been said, how much of a problem do you believe that, or how much should it concern us that this port agreement has been signed in November?
No, you see, anything which happens with respect to China in Myanmar is a matter of concern to India. I think with a larger and larger degree of involvement of the Chinese within the physical territory of Myanmar is a cause of concern to us, because besides other things, you see, it impacts on our own relationship with this country. One of the things which I think which we need to understand is geography. You see, when we are looking at China and Myanmar, the mountains are actually going, their communication is through the valleys. So when we have to move from the Chinese side onto the Myanmari side, the movement is very, very smooth. And that makes for a very easy flow of men and materials, of humans and materials. But when we are looking at the physical geography between India and Myanmar, you've got to actually cross the ridge line. And then you come to the valley, then you cross the second ridge line, then you cross the valley. So in our case, that movement, that access is far more difficult. So I think this is one of the constraints of geography, and this gives a natural advantage to the Chinese. But as Professor Muni so rightly said, I think the more important thing is now to cultivate goodwill. Let us remember that for a very, very long time, India's relationship with Myanmar were on a deep freeze. For various reasons, we will not go into those reasons, but they were on a deep freeze, whereas China had cultivated Myanmar for a very long time. Now, Myanmar is wary of what China is going to do, because the fear of a debt trap is there. That is why in this, the level of investments which were actually, which China had agreed to give to Myanmar, which is a mutual agreement, they're cutting down on those investments. But for us, when you're talking specifically of the port, I think that becomes part of a larger, so to say, design of the Chinese, which has also been called by the Americans as the string of pearls. You see, and this is one of the pearls, right? Then you come to Chittagong, then you come to, in Sri Lanka, Hambantota, yeah. And then of course you come to Gwadar. So when you're looking at these strings of pearls, ultimately who is getting encircled? It is India. But of course we can do the reverse. We can do the reverse bit too. So I think for us it is very important to cultivate these good relations. I think that is why I think this visit of the President is a very, very important visit.
Right.
It has got much more of that. It is not so much in terms of physical connectivities or materially or what each country can do for each other.
It's highly symbolic.
It is symbolic, and I think it is building that trust.
Right.
You see, the Prime Minister has been there. Now the President is going there. It's a high-level visit. And the more we have, of course, Aung Suu Kyi has come here. So the more of these visits which take place, the building of trust between these two countries, I think is very important.
Right.
There's one more point, just a small point on the security aspect. One of the things you see when Myanmar was in turmoil, a large number of their people who were fighting the dictatorship, so to say, they took refuge in India. And now many of them are in positions in government and in power and in civil society. I think we have that goodwill there.
Absolutely.
And we need to capitalize on that goodwill to further strengthen this relationship. And on the basis of that goodwill, many other doors will open.
All right. Yes, Ambassador.
I was wanting to add a point that yes, China is building a deep sea port, but India also is developing Sikri port. So actually we should focus very much on what we are doing with the Myanmar people and do it well. And do it on time and do it in a way that benefits the people of Myanmar and of course the people of India. So if we continue our program of development of Sikri port and building the road from Sikri port to the Myanmar-Mizoram border, which will then be an integral part of the Kaladan multimodal and complete the Kaladan multimodal project, then that will show to the people of the western region of Myanmar that we are serious. Because there is one thing that most of the focus of foreign partners in Myanmar is on the Irrawaddy and east of the Irrawaddy. There's very little focus on the region west of the Irrawaddy, which is the border with India, and where the development is not so much as compared to the region of Myanmar east of the Irrawaddy. So we should focus on that, bring in education, health, development programs, this trilateral highway project and so on, so that the people of Myanmar immediately understand that we are doing it for their benefit and it's going to be of permanent benefit to them.
Absolutely. You know, Professor, talking about Sitwe and talking about the Rakhine province, of course, you know, what about the Rakhine State Development Program and the Rohingyas?
Well, Rohingya issue, Chinese pleased the Myanmaris more than what we could, because we had to take a very balanced position between Bangladesh and Myanmar, and I think for right reasons. We have not alienated them, but it is a sensitive issue, and I think we continue to plead with Myanmar to accommodate the Rohingyas which are going from Bangladesh, and unfortunately not much progress is still being paid there. Now coming to other projects, see, the problem with us has so far been, and I think it is being corrected but is still not fully corrected, is the slow implementation of the projects. The multimodal transport projects which Ambassador Sikri mentioned has taken a long time, and Myanmaris are not very excited that if you one project while the Chinese deliver it very fast. Still, I must say that the Myanmaris are taking a very balanced view. They are not putting all their eggs into the Chinese basket. Besides scaling down some of the Chinese projects, which I mentioned, even this port, but we may have to watch this port very carefully. Because if this port takes the form of Gwadar, even without the scale of Gwadar, it is very sensitive security-wise to India.
Absolutely.
Because it's very close to us than what we can think of Gwadar.
And especially when they are building that Kral Canal, I think, in Thailand.
No, Kra Canal is still in dispute, because there are many, though the Thais have accepted, but Singapore and other countries are not very excited about it. But yes,
that should also concern us, because it gives us direct access to the Andaman Sea.
Absolutely, but this port straight away brings Chinese into the Bay of Bengal.
Absolutely, yeah.
And therefore we have to be extremely watchful as to what kind of development is taking place. And Chinese are not converting a commercial facility into a strategic asset, which the Chinese are very apt in doing. Both we have seen Hamban Tota, the submarines floating around, and Gwadar, of course, we understand. So we have to be very, very careful. But what I want to underline is that the Myanmaris, all said and done, are conscious about it. And what the game which they are playing is a balancing game. You know, they have allowed India to build Sitwe. They have also asked us to make some special economic zones, which we are still not able to do that. But they have invited Japanese. They have invited Chinese, Japanese and Koreans, and Japanese are also building a deep sea port. So what they are doing is, you know, they are putting diverse stakeholders at the same place in order to balance each other, and they cannot avoid the Chinese. I want to add one more point, that besides geography, China has deep links with Myanmar because of various ethnic groups who, you know, spill over into the Chinese and into Myanmar. And some of the Chinese influences have been very strong in couple of ethnic groups like Karens, and we must keep an eye. In fact, many of the ethnic groups have sought the Chinese mediation, brought in Chinese. Chinese have used them as a pressure point on Myanmar. So the whole story of the military regime which the Chinese supported unconditionally for a very, very long time. Even against ASEAN, even against India or anybody else.
Right.
Looking at this, I think Myanmar is very carefully moving around it. They cannot completely ignore China. And anything which the Chinese do, we should not be alert, but we have to keep a watch on it and keep monitoring as to what its consequences would be.
You know, talking about the military regime, General, is the Myanmar government concerned or perturbed about what the West thinks of them, especially after the Rohingya crisis, and is that something that's playing on their minds?
No, when you're looking at the Rohingya crisis per se, I think this is an issue very close to the hearts of all Myanmaris. They have never accepted this group of people as being part of them. And I think one of the reasons why they have not accepted it, because this large segment of Rohingyas, they have actually never bothered to join the mainstream. They have kept themselves aloof. And not only have they kept themselves aloof, it is also a fact that they have been provided arms and training by certain terrorist organizations to fight against the regime. Even at the time of independence, of the Myanmar's independence, there was a move to take these people away and put them as part of, at that time, East Pakistan. So those memories still linger on as far as the public is concerned. And I think even Aung Suu Kyi, despite being such an internationally acclaimed figure known for her peace missions and all that, even she could not give support to the Rohingyas, and I don't think anybody in Myanmar will do so. I can understand, I can appreciate their concerns. Having said that, I think it still remains a sensitive issue, but I do not see the political establishment or the military actually budging on this particular issue. It is a matter of concern to them.
Right.
I think it is also a matter of concern to us. You see, these people, the Rohingyas who have come to India, they're not part of us. So, when people start saying that they should be accepted, no, I think they have got their own homeland. People should go back to the homeland. And we have to create conditions by which they go back to the homeland where they belong to. And it is not the job of India to take back anybody and everybody from across the world.
And at the end of the day, they pose a security threat as
well.
They
do pose a security threat. So, the question is that, this again leads us to a very large land border. But that I think we can discuss later on those security issues.
Absolutely. Ambassador, is there any aspect of the bilateral relationship that needs special attention or that needs to be looked at closely, do you think?
I think we need to focus on implementation, because with Myanmar, one of the big disappointments from the Myanmar people has been a very slow rate of implementation. Whether it's the trilateral highway, which is India, Myanmar, Thailand, or the Kaladan multimodal, our progress has been very slow. And then even in trade, where trade was improving, we had a good bilateral trade of over $2 billion US dollars both ways. I think it has fallen drastically because our imports of lentils and pulses from Myanmar has fallen drastically over the last year. So that also has adversely affected the farmers of Myanmar. The farming community, the agricultural community needs technology, small and medium development of projects. So there's something that we can really give a lot of promise to. I think on the Rakhine issue, I'd like to add a word on the Rohingya issue. I think that India is in a very important position because we have very good relations with both Bangladesh and Myanmar. And this issue of the Rohingyas has a huge humanitarian aspect. It's a humanitarian disaster of massive proportions because almost 1 million people have come into Bangladesh, and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has shown great sagacity and statesmanship in receiving them and accommodating them. But there's not enough finances to look after them, and there's a huge problem of looking after them. At the same time, it is important for Bangladesh and Myanmar to get together and to solve the problem. They did. They have an MOU. They had agreed to return of the people, but the refugees refused to go back. So that is where the security dimension of the problem comes in, and the concern that the radicalization of this group, because there's a lot of evidence from people who have been to the camps that there's a great effort going on at radicalization, and that area of Bangladesh is very sensitive. So because of that, there's a fear in Myanmar itself. The international community has come down very hard on the Myanmar generals and so on, because of the fact that there was this military action taken against them. But that action was taken because of the security threat, because of the ARSA, the group of the Salvation Army, the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. So both Bangladesh and Myanmar greatly value India's position in this. And India, in balancing its position between the two, has created a very important role for itself. So I think that in our own interest, it's not only for Bangladesh and Myanmar, which are, both of them are very good friends of India, but for India's own interest, because the security dimension of this problem can well come over into India. And we've seen some of the Rohingyas trying to enter Northeast Indian states. We've seen some of the Rohingyas coming to other parts of India, going to Kerala, going to faraway states and so on. And their actions are very suspect. So India has been keeping a very careful eye, but at the same time, we have to keep very close touch with all the players in this game.
Absolutely. Professor, going forward, do you believe there are any aspects of the relationship that need some ironing out?
Well, I think the major points which again we are all repeatedly underlining is the fast implementation as it is of the project. Secondly, you know, we have a major issue of insurgency which is spills over into Myanmar, and we have periodically sought their help, and rightly so, and they have come forward about this. Thirdly, on the Rohingya issue, let me say that it has two aspects. If it is not settled easily or fast enough, then the radicalization process and some of them turning to the terrorist cadres is far more greater than when it is settled there. Now, the problem of settlement actually does not lie either with Bangladesh or with India. It primarily lies with Myanmar, which has got to give an assurance to these people that their security will be taken care of and they will be treated as now this is where the contradiction, internal contradiction, which is deep seated, it is not new, is a big problem. And you know, the Western community has gone far ahead even in taking some of the awards and honors given to Suu Kyi. We have not joined that chorus, and good enough. We should not join that chorus. We should assure them of continued support at the same time, telling them that they have to settle this issue. Now, it is it is largely dominated by the army, and to some extent Aung San Suu Kyi has limitations in really controlling that. But somehow we should plead with both the civilian component and the military component in the Myanmar's constitutional system, that they have to address this problem, because without that this is going to be a regional concern, not only limited to Myanmar but also to Bangladesh as well as to India, and the whole international community is already talking about it. So in future, I think we must continue to build equations with them, deliver on what we promise. If we cannot deliver on time and to their satisfaction, we better not promise it.
Right.
And thirdly, keep an eye on what other forces are working in Myanmar.
All right. General, of what strategic importance really is Myanmar to India?
Oh, I think amongst all the countries of ASEAN, I think the greatest importance lies with Myanmar. You see, Myanmar is our gateway to Southeast Asia, to ASEAN. And without Myanmar, we can't move. So when we are looking at it, I think our relationship with Myanmar has to be of a very, very high order. For many years, it was not so. Right? I'm not saying that the relationships were bad. Let me put it in a different way. I think they were in a diplomatic freeze. Right? And now they are, you know, that thaw has set in some years back. The root cause, you know, I mean, one of the problem areas after the thaw set in was what both my colleagues have said, the implementation mechanisms. I remember about 6 years ago, a think tank had come from Myanmar and we were carrying out this discussion here in Delhi. And one of the delegates actually made this statement. This happened about 6 years back. And he made the statement that he said, you see, our problem is that when the Indian Prime Minister comes here and promises a road, which will be ready within 1 year, 5 years down the line, it is still on paper. But when the Chinese Prime Minister comes here, it is executed. So I think, you know, when we are talking of the implementation mechanisms, it is vital that we execute what we have promised or don't promise it at all. That means whatever statements have been made by a leader, if my Prime Minister or President has made a statement, then I think it is incumbent on the part of the nation to see that that is executed. That is one. The second thing is, you know, when we're looking at internal security, internally, if India can actually resolve our security issues within the country itself, one of the reasons why we have still problem with the NSCN, the Khaplang group, is because this group has taken shelter in Myanmar. You see, in the jungles on the other side. Now, I have operated in both, on my side of the border, and I know the difficulties which are there on the other side. So for anybody to state that the Myanmar army is not doing the job, that is not true. They are doing the best they can, but it is a huge area and the jungles are not accessible. So I can understand their constraints. Having said that, I think there is already a good deal of cooperation and intelligence sharing, but I think even that level could be further ramped up.
Right.
And that would help both the countries in their internal security.
Sure. All right. Closing comments now from all my guests, starting first with you, Ambassador, with the best way forward as far as the bilateral relationship is concerned.
The best way forward would be to move ahead strongly on the multi-pronged relationship that we have. I think defense and security does play a vital role because India's northeast, the security and development of India's northeast is crucially linked up with Myanmar. And 5 northeastern states have a land border with Myanmar, and that's huge. And we have to work for the interest of both these northeastern states and the counterpart regions on the Myanmar side, whether it's the Chin Autonomous region, the Sagaing region and others. There's so much ethnicity, religion commonalities, ethnicity commonalities, linguistic commonalities. We have to build upon it. We have to make sure that they have friendship and development on both sides.
Right.
Because somehow the Myanmar side is not at all developed, and this creates its own problems internally. So I think defense and security is vital. Trade is vital because for well-being.
Sure.
Border trade is vital. So for developing the border trade, now what is happening, we've developed border trade, but we see a lot of Chinese-made goods coming across. So there's no industry on the Myanmar side, there's no development of goods there.
Right.
So we have to make sure they develop. And this area of Myanmar develops, the western area. So this is absolute vital. Education is vital because I think when you have economic prosperity, education, it leads to economic prosperity. Entrepreneurship. Right. So these are very vital, important areas that we have to work
Professor,
on.
how do we take the relationship to the next level?
I think besides security, trade, economic, which are very vital and it should be emphasized, we have to take down the relations to people's level, where I find is still there is a very poor exchanges taking place, both in terms of religion. Buddhism is a binding factor between us, but tourism is another area which can be taken into. And if Northeast gets an access to not only to Myanmar, I would say through Myanmar to Southeast Asia, it would hugely develop Northeast, and then people will start flowing here and there. So I think the area which comparatively stands neglected is people-to-people level, which should be strengthened.
Right. General, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Right. I think I agree with both my colleagues here. Very, very, very well put across. I'll just like to put one last little bit in. You see, people-to-people contact is vital, but this people-to-people contact can only take place if you've got the communications through. So I think we need to get those roads, we need to get the railways, and we need to get air connectivity between the two countries, and then everything else is possible. And we need to stick to timelines. So I think the goodwill part of it is being done by the Prime Minister's visit, by the visit of the President. Now it comes on to the people who have to execute these measures on the ground. And if they can take them forward in a quick time frame, I think we are going to see great development between the two peoples. And I think this is something which will develop our Northeast, it will develop the Myanmar region, and it will be a win-win situation for all of us.
All right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of India's World. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. We'd like to hear from you as well. You can share your feedback with us. Our email ID is indiasworld.feedback@gmail.com. You can also tweet to us using our Twitter handles at FRP09 and at Rajya Sabha TV. That's it on this edition of India's World. See you again next time.